Hello everyone and welcome into another installment of the weekly recap. This will be a recap to some but not all of the events of the past week that I talked about in the APB stream yesterday. This recap is more condensed and concise, but it's also more advertiser friendly, which means that you're not going to be seeing me cursing and swearing and all of that. So if you want to get a taste of all of that, you're going to have to go to my stream channel link down below and subscribe. I stream every week at Saturday 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Best way to support this channel is to visit the stream and drop a super chat on Stream Elements for a live and direct shout out. Without further ado, let's get into the hooplas. In one of the most shocking and horrific events that no one has ever reported during the Super Bowl, seriously, you guys need to prepare yourselves to hear this. Snoop Dogg, the famous rapper, got caught in 4K smoking some joint. Oh my lord! How can you do this to your fans, Snoop? How dare you indulge yourself in mankind's most unhealthy desires? No, seriously though, it's kind of funny in how some outlets think that this is some brand new revelation of the character of Snoop Dogg that we're not aware of. One thing I can say for sure about Snoop is that his streaming game is top tier. You know how Hassan left the stream to let some videos play? Snoop just left his stream running for 8+ hours and he just noticed it the next day. Well, to be fair to him, unlike Hassan, at least that was an accident. It's been known that the fighting game community is filled with the most interesting individuals.
No, I just got body in my face. Oh my god!
Actually, the competitive gaming scene is filled with so many interesting individuals, so it's not surprising when Tanukana, a professional Tekken player, got fired for saying some seriously controversial statements, such as how men who are under 170 centimeters or 5'6" shouldn't have rights. Now, I talk this more as an exaggerated joke, but apparently those are her real opinions. And those aren't the only real opinions that she has that are super controversial. A lot of these takes are so brutally hilarious, I don't think I can air them on YouTube without incurring the wrath of the yellow $sign. So if you want to see our genuine reactions to her other hot takes, I suggest you to go check out our stream link down below at this specific timestamp. Just click on the link at the source and it will take you straight there. Apparently, DC has brand new Robin and Nightwing covers featuring Dick Grayson being super hot. In other news, women are wet. Seriously, I don't see any issues with Dick Grayson being hot. He is actually one of the hottest characters in the DC universe. His ass in DC universe is so good. Even women and aliens are jealous of it. Not because they couldn't sleep with him, although most of them are jealous because of that, but jealous that they can't have ass that good. That's how hot Dick Grayson is. To be clear, my stance on fiction is that I want both hot men and hot women to stay. I want sexy women in fiction in the same way I want sexy men in fiction. I am an advocate of gender equality, and I want both men and women in fiction to be featured as revealing as possible and as appealing as possible. At the end of the day, it's a win-win. Say what you want about Genshin Impact, but it's something that they're really good at, providing hot men and hot women. So please, give us the hot men and the hot women for all the stuff in fiction and stop the double standards in this industry. I mean, seriously. And speaking of hot women, the free-to-play MMO video game Lost Ark has been booming lately. Last time I talked about Lost Ark, I was talking about the game's censorship and some really odd design choices for the characters' races. I already talked about this Hoopla and how the game is censored for the wider release, but the game is still being played by lots of people anyway, because things that I said on the internet don't matter. According to Steam, it has some really mixed reviews, and according to Indonesia's Steam, it's not available in my country. This time, Lost Ark got into Kotaku's crosshairs because the women just feels decades out of date. Imagine doing all of that censorship and still have Kotaku to complain about it. Now, from what I've seen, Lost Ark seems to fulfill the tropes of the classic 2000s era MMO. The over-the-top fantasy character designs are very reminiscent of MMOs from that era. Even the walking animation for the female characters are just like how supermodels walk. Yeah, lots of people make fun of that. But still, Lost Ark brings that sort of 2000 era MMO to the public, but with modern graphics and modern technologies. Actually, a lot of online MMOs from South Korea do that. And honestly, I don't mind that. The 2000s is not a bad era for gaming. There are lots and lots of amazing games that came out in that era, so I don't mind these female character designs. They're evocative of an era of games that's pretty nostalgic and amazing. That said, I also don't mind male characters getting their shares of fan service too. Again, I advocate for gender equality. Game journalists and lots of other people in the industry seem to think that the outdated things are automatically bad for the industry. If that's the case, then we wouldn't have games trying to evoke the 90s era of gaming or pop culture evoking the eras of the previous decades. To me and most people in the gaming community, there's nothing wrong with the female character designs. I do agree that these designs belong in the 2000s, but you can't deny that there are so many good things from the 2000s in the gaming landscape. That being said, there are things that I think Lost Ark should just left in the bin, such as gender-locked classes. That's right, if you're playing Lost Ark, warrior is restricted to the men, and mages and assassins are restricted to the women. Now, this is a design choice from the 2000s that I think should be just left in the dustbin. I want my female warriors. Thankfully, the game's gonna patch that sooner for the wider release, which is absolutely excellent. But all I'm saying is, while there are remnants of the past that are worth re-exploring once again, there are also remnants of the past that should remain remnants of the past. I am perfectly fine with my female characters walking like supermodels and my male characters looking like either muscular bodybuilders or really attractive underwear models or something, but I am not fine with installing this 40 gig plus game by swapping 10 plus DVD discs. That is a technology that should be left behind, as much as I love DVDs. Though I don't play MMOs in general, and this game isn't available in Indonesia, so I don't see why I need to complain about this. The dogs certainly love to complain about that. Seriously. Can y'all just shut up? These senators of the United States of America, who are clearly and definitely working for the interest of the American people and the rest of the world, are currently proposing a bill that will protect the children from all sorts of moral degeneracy. For the average person, that sounds like a promising endeavor. For the more experienced and keen-eyed individuals out there, you might see this as another attempt by the government to control and censor the public discourse by hiding under the disguise of protecting children. But hey, let's hear it from them anyway. The Kids Online Safety Act has a proposal. The proposal is to prevent the promotion of certain harmful behaviors, give parents and users the ability to opt out of algorithmic recommendations, prevent third parties from viewing a minor's data, and limit the kids' time spent on the platform. They also propose that it's the responsibility of the big tech to make sure that these children are being handled safely. Senator Blumenthal said that the big tech should be held accountable for deeply dangerous algorithms driven by dollars and eyeballs. Unfortunately, we're living in a digital age where you absolutely have to be online in order to do the most essential stuff. So, if kids have to be online, then some form of restrictions should be applied. And yes, I do agree that anyone under the age of 18 should have restrictions and limitations applied to their social media accounts so that they don't end up witnessing all sorts of family unfriendly content. There are many things that I'd rather under 18 people do than browse social media, but you know how kids these days are. They're free and rebellious and can do whatever they like. Though funnily enough, being free and rebellious is the social norm for kids these days. Being controlled and responsible is actually going against the social norm because we're living in a backwards reality. I don't know. I guess times have changed. What I disagreed with is the part where it's the platform's duty. I'm sorry, senators, but I find that highly contentious. I'm very sure that most children have parents or parental figures in their lives, basically adults who are responsible with their well-being. It doesn't have to be their parents. It could be their siblings, their uncles, aunts, grandparents, foster parents, anyone who has a responsibility to take care of them. I think those people are the ones who are more effective in dealing with children than the big tech social media platforms. Besides, it is already possible for you to opt out of algorithmic recommendations. Many social media websites already give you lots of controls over what kind of data you can share to the big tech. Even your Google account has privacy and security features and options that I'm sure 99% of you haven't checked. Seriously, go visit your privacy settings once in a while. you'll know what kind of stuff that Google has been tracking from you. Privacy Badger is an extension that you can use to halt all forms of tracking as you're browsing through the web. I highly recommend that extension. Though if you're logging in using Google through certain websites, it won't work until you turn that off temporarily, so keep that in mind. Point is, a lot of these privacy protections and options are already available at your fingertips. All you need is to explore more and configure them to your liking. And most importantly, please teach kids how to behave online. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you all to the next installment of Nintendo's corporate hands screwing people over their investment to their older consoles. I briefly mentioned this in my last video where I talk about how I sailed the 7 seas, jailbreaking consoles, emulating games, grabbing some of their most precious ROMs off of the internet, something that Nintendo keeps on encouraging the customers to do. Of course, they didn't do it intentionally, but they clearly do not understand the concept of actions and consequences. When will they learn? When will they learn that their actions have consequences? Nintendo 3DS and Wii U games will be discontinued off of the sales by March 2023. You can read more details through the announcement linked down below. But to put it simply, if you have the games, you can still download them off of their servers. They just won't let you buy new games after March 2023. So once you hit March 2023, all the games that have been released for those two platforms cannot be bought at all. So how are you going to install any new games? Well, you can buy the physical copies off of the used market, some of which have outrageous prices that will gouge your eyes when you see them. And yes, I said physical copies. What if the game only has digital copies? There are like thousands of games that only have digital version. How will you buy those games then? You won't. You won't. You can't. You're out of luck. Or at least legally. The next solution is to hack and jailbreak the consoles so that you can install the ROMs of those games on it, and then you just download the ROMs off of websites that you can just search on Google. The less legal way, sure, but it seems that Nintendo is offering no choice for the users on this matter. I already have a video talking about jailbreaking, one of which includes the 3DS. I also have a video in how I sailed the 7 seas to get the stuff online. To put it simply, just Google game name ROM. You should find plenty of sites. Just be careful because a lot of these sites can be quite dodgy. Make sure you click the right download button. And you absolutely should jailbreak your consoles because in that way, you can open it up to even more games from even more platforms. This is Metroid Fusion, the GBA version. Yes, there's the Virtual Console version of the 3DS, but this is the GBA version. I can play this with an emulator on my jailbroken 3DS. This is Zelda: A Link to the Past, the GBA version, and I'm playing it on my 3DS. You can use your jailbroken consoles and handhelds to install emulators in it so that you can play games from other platforms, especially classic games from other platforms. Clearly, Nintendo doesn't like this at all. But that's not the end of this ridiculous endeavor. Nintendo is also offering a Q&A section to answer all of your wonderful questions. The first question is pretty straightforward. Why is this happening? I don't know why they frame it that way, but it is a pretty harrowing question. The answer to this question is the following. This is part of the natural life cycle for any product line as it becomes less used by consumers over time. Well, you can talk about how it's natural all you like, but if I look at your other competitors, Nintendo, it doesn't seem like it's a natural thing. Both Sony and Microsoft are offering backwards compatibility for their older titles with varying degrees of success, Microsoft being the best in all of them. Steam and GOG are inundated with games from several decades ago that you can still buy right now for cheap and have them to actually be working. The only reason why it's a natural cycle for Nintendo is because they're not offering any forms of backwards compatibility to any of their previous games. Any new console that they have needs to have a brand new gimmick and a brand new system, which means that the only way for Nintendo to bring their older titles to their modern consoles is if they actually put the effort to port them and charge the users lots of money for it. And this is under the assumption that the ports work. There were lots of issues plaguing the Nintendo 64 emulation when it was just released. From what I've heard, it's getting better. But this just proves to you that Nintendo is only doing the absolute bare minimum to preserve their legacy of games. And when they are doing it, they want to make sure that they got paid for it, even at a price so ridiculous, only the most loyal of corporate bootlickers are willing to pay for them. But here's what gets the noggin jogging. There's a question that Nintendo deleted that we thankfully managed to archive. The question basically asked a couple of questions. Will Nintendo make classic games available in some way? If not, then why? Doesn't Nintendo have an obligation to preserve its classic games by continually making them available for purchase? These are all good questions, and their answers are really stupid. Nintendo's first point is, well, yes, but we have these other games that you can play. You can subscribe to Nintendo Online right now and get access to these legacy titles. So your solution to game preservation is to only give certain specific titles to that and to have the users to subscribe to your crap online service. And you wonder why people chose to sail the seven seas. The second point is just reinforcing the first one. This is an effective way to make classic content easily available to a broad range of players. Guys, don't be fooled. When Nintendo says that it's an effective way, what they meant is effective in a money-making sense. It is an effective way for them to exploit your nostalgia and make lots of money from you. And you wonder why people sail the seas. The third point is just fantastic. We currently have no plans to offer classic content in other ways. In other words, the other ways don't make us as much money. Again, ladies and gentlemen, don't be fooled. There are many effective ways for them to offer classic content to you all. They just won't do it because doing so will cost money. And you wonder why people sail the seas. Nintendo's attitudes towards their legacy titles have been nothing but a begrudging obligation. The gamers keep on demanding it, yes, but we also need to make even more money. So let's give them what they want, but screw them over in the process. At the end of the day, these are still the same old Nintendo. Great games, garbage company. And finally, we're gonna talk about another topic that I also talk about occasionally: video game localization. Fun fact, I used to work freelance translating stuff from Bahasa Indonesia to English and vice versa. Most of the translations that I do are for formal papers, though I have done fan subs for Legend of Korra in the past. I know what it's like to be a translator. The language is different in its context, but I do know how it feels like. And let me tell you, it's not pleasant, and it's the kind of work that I'm not gonna brag about. Not because my translations are bad. My translation is actually about as accurate to the source material as possible. But it's because it's really not something worth bragging about. And even then, I know certain words in Japan, for example, that don't translate to English very well. For example, let's take the word tsundere. The word tsundere is not available in English. A lot of the characters tend to say that. It means a character who tends to be insecure about their feelings, and they switch from being cute and adorable to being brash and dismissive, or vice versa. Now, if you are within the context of an anime with Japanese characters taking place in Japan in modern times, it makes sense to keep the word as it is. Anime fans know a couple of Japanese words, and tsundere is derived from sun sun and dere dere. That's one of them. If you don't know what tsundere means, you're not an anime fan. Plain and simple. But if you're in a world where the characters don't speak Japanese, like, say, Victorian London, it makes no sense for the English characters to say the word tsundere because it's a term that doesn't exist in their period of time. Though to be fair, that won't stop the creators from doing that. The only reason why it would make sense is if a character from the modern times got isekai'd into medieval England and the character says the word tsundere and teach everyone in England what it means. And if you have to ask what isekai mean, you're not an anime fan. I don't make the rules. My point is, I understand translation jobs. I understand how one country has different ways of saying things in other countries. So I can relate to translators when they say that their work sucks. There are translators who said that there's a concerning amount of distrust and resentment between them and the consumers. I absolutely agree. There's a lot of distrust between the two. My question is, who's in the wrong? I mean, one side will say that the other side is in the wrong, and they will constantly fight and bicker at each other, and vice versa. I do know one thing for sure. If you make a product and the consumers prefer other products, blaming the consumers for it is generally never a good idea. River City Girls Zero is gonna have a release on the Switch. Wait for it reveals that there are two versions of the game's translations. You got the new translation, which will closely resemble the original River City Girls translation, and you got the literal translation, which is as direct translation as possible. This got a lot of people mad. For some reason. I think the reason is because of how it's framed. Of course, as a translator, you cannot directly translate one language to another, word for word, without considering all sorts of stuff. Grammar, sentence structures, common phrases, the culture surrounding the language, and how people react to the words being said. I know about all of that. I used to translate formal academic papers. You get paid to translate video games. But what WayForward meant, and they did change this to be that way, is that the literal version is the original translation, and the new version is the River City Girls translation. It's a translation that closely resembles the original translation of the original Kunio-kun game in the style of the original Kunio-kun game. But even then, a bunch of translators are still upset about this. The first complaint that I've seen is that having two localization versions make the translators feel devalued. And
I missed the part where that's my problem.
of course you would feel devalued if a player prefers someone else's work than yours. That's just life. That's the harsh reality of the gaming market. People have preferences. People will choose which version that they like better. If a good portion of the players don't choose yours, that tells us quite a lot about your work. Another point is how no other creative position in game dev has to have their work duke it out with other competing visions in this way. That's just factually wrong. There are many video games that offer different elements that you as a player can select yourself. Different visuals like in Resident Evil 4 HD, where you can switch back to the original textures. Different music like in Dragon Quest XI, where you can switch from the MIDI to the orchestral version. Actually, there are lots of Japanese games that offer the original and the remixed tracks. You can mod the original Trails in the Sky PC version to have soundtracks from the Evolution version. Different aesthetics like in Dragon Quest XI, where you can play the game in 3D or in 2D. Alternate costumes and portraits for characters made by different artists, like in Tekken. Different takes, different interpretations, different options. They've been available in games for decades, especially remakes and remasters of games. Players are able to choose which version that they prefer the most. That's their prerogative. If they don't pick your version, that's too bad. If you're just gonna quit because of that, then you're not ready for this industry. This is the video game industry. Players are entitled to have options of products that they paid. You are paid to serve them. If you don't like to serve these players, please leave this industry for your own sake. The general complaint that I got is that it's disrespectful to the translators if they're gonna have another version that they didn't work at. And my response is, I missed the part where that's my problem. I am a consumer of this industry. If I think your translation is bad, we're gonna say it like it is. We're not gonna sugarcoat it. If your work is bad, then we'll say that your work is bad. If you don't like that we'll say it that way, then don't work at an industry where people give negative feedbacks, because negative feedbacks will always happen. It will always happen in nearly all industries. Good luck finding any job. What's really not help is when we gave these feedbacks and criticisms, and these game translators characterized them as bad faith arguments, or even calling us insert political alignment that they disagree with here. Yes, the players are quite harsh in their criticisms, but instead of focusing on the points that matter, you chose to do the easy route and play the victim. And you wonder why people have a distrust with game translators. That's all for the video today. If you like it, you can go ahead and click the like button and subscribe for more. If you wish, you can support the channel through the links down below, stream channel as well. Subscribe to the stream channel, links down below. And thanks for watching.